The woman's blade moved with such practiced precision that Eli Thompson thought he was watching a magician perform sleight of hand. Except the magic was sweat and leather, and the particular grace that came from knowing your craft so well, your hands moved faster than thought. By the time the sun reached its peak on that scorching August morning in 1882, Zara Gallagher had already tanned 12 buffalo hides in the yard behind her small property on the outskirts of Gunnison, Colorado, and Eli, who had been working cattle ranches since he was 16 and thought he knew every trick of frontier survival, could not understand how it was possible. He had ridden into town 3 days earlier with Mr. Garrett's herd, the best hand the old rancher had, which mentally got first choice of accommodations and time off while the cattle were sold and sorted. Most of the other hands headed straight for the saloons, but Eli preferred to explore to learn new things, to improve his skills. That was how he had spotted her that first morning, working in her yard as the dawn light turned the mountains pink and gold. He had watched from a respectful distance as she worked through hide after hide with a speed that seemed impossible, her dark hair tied back with a leather cord, her sleeves rolled up to reveal strong, capable forearms. Now, on this third morning, he finally worked up the courage to approach. He waited until she set down her tools and wiped her hands on her apron, then walked across the dusty street with his hat in his hands. "Madam," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended, "I do not mean to intrude, but I have been watching you work these past few days, and I have to ask, how in God's name do you tan 12 hides before noon?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of amber in sunlight, and for a moment she said nothing, just studied him with an expression that was neither welcoming nor hostile, merely assessing. She was younger than he had thought from a distance, probably around his own age of 24, with a face that would have been beautiful if it were not so serious, so guarded. "Why do you want to know?" she asked finally. "Because I have been working ranches for 8 years, and I have never seen anyone work that fast. Because I like to learn. Because I respect skill when I see it." He met her gaze steadily. "And because I figure if you are doing something that remarkable, there is a story behind it, and I would like to hear it." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the eyes that might have been the beginning of trust. "You are Garrett's man, the one they call his best hand." "Eli Thompson, madam." He did not ask how she knew. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone else's business or thought they did. "Zara Gallagher." She wiped her hands again, though they were already clean, then gestured to a bench under a cottonwood tree at the edge of her property. "I suppose I can spare a few minutes to talk, but if you are looking for some kind of secret technique, you will be disappointed. It is just practice and necessity." They sat in the dappled shade, and Eli waited for her to speak, sensing that pushing would only make her retreat. Up close, he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the calluses on her fingers, the particular kind of weariness that came from working too hard for too long. She smelled like smoke and leather, and something floral that might have been lavender soap. "My father was a trapper," she said finally, her gaze fixed on the mountains in the distance. "He taught me everything he knew about hides and tanning before he died 6 years ago. My mother passed when I was young, so it was just the two of us for a long time. He used to say I had a gift for it, but really it was just that I paid attention and practiced until my hands knew the movements without my brain having to think about them." "I am sorry about your father," Eli said quietly. She nodded, accepting the sympathy without dwelling on it. "After he died, I had to make a living somehow. I tried other work, but nothing paid as well or suited me as well as this. The buffalo herds are smaller now than they used to be, but I buy hides from hunters and traders who come through town. I tan them faster and better than anyone else in this part of Colorado, so they keep coming back. 12 before noon, though, that is not just skill, that is something else entirely. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first real expression of warmth he had seen from her. You really want to know the secret, if you are willing to share it. I start at 3 in the morning when it is still cool. The summer heat is the enemy of good tanning. It makes the leather stiff and brittle if you are not careful. So I work in the dark by lamplight through the coolest hours. By the time the sun is up, I have already been at it for 4 hours. Add another 4 or 5 after that, and 12 hides is ambitious but achievable if you know what you are doing and do not waste motion. Eli shook his head in amazement. That is a 16-hour day, easy, counting preparation and cleanup. Closer to 18 most days. She said it matter-of-factly without pride or complaint, but I like the work. It keeps me occupied. And it pays well enough that I can keep this property and take care of myself without depending on anyone. There was a story in those words, Eli sensed. A history of disappointments and betrayals that had taught her self-reliance was safer than trust. He recognized it because he carried his own version of that story. His father had been a drunk who squandered everything the family had. His mother had worked herself into an early grave trying to keep them fed. Eli had left home at 16 swearing he would never be dependent on anyone, never be the cause of someone else's suffering through his own weakness or failure. I understand that, he said. The not depending on any one part. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. Do you? My father drank himself to death while my mother worked herself to death trying to compensate. I decided a long time ago I would rather die alone than put someone through that. That is a bleak philosophy. So is working 18-hour days because you trust yourself more than you trust anyone else. She laughed, a sudden bright sound that transformed her face and made Eli's chest feel tight. I suppose you have me there, Mr. Thompson. Eli, please. Zara. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. I should get back to work. I have 2 more hides to finish before the heat gets too bad. Eli stood as well, reluctant to leave but not wanting to overstay his welcome. Could I come back tomorrow, watch you work? I promise I will not get in the way, I just want to see how you do it. She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing the risks of letting someone into her space, her routine, her carefully controlled life. Finally, she nodded. If you are serious about learning, I could use help hauling water from the creek. My back is not as young as it used to be. I will be here at first light. First light is not early enough. 3 in the morning, Mr. Thompson. That is when the work begins. Eli, he corrected gently. And I will be here. He was true to his word. When Zara emerged from her small cabin at 3 the next morning, lamp in hand, Eli was already waiting by her work area with 2 buckets of fresh creek water. She stopped in the doorway, clearly surprised, then gave him a nod of approval. I thought you might change your mind, she said. I do not change my mind once it is made up. Good trait in a cowhand. We will see if it is a good trait in a student. She worked him hard over the following hours, teaching him the intricacies of scraping and stretching, soaking and treating, the careful balance of chemicals and timing that turned raw hide into supple leather. Eli had thought himself a quick study, but Zara's standards were exacting, and she corrected him without mercy when he made mistakes. He found he did not mind. There was no cruelty in her criticism, only the passion of someone who cared deeply about their craft and wanted others to understand it properly. As the sky began to lighten, they worked side by side in companionable silence, and Eli felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he did not have words for. He had known beautiful women before, had even fancied himself in love once or twice, but those had been shallow attachments based on pretty faces and pleasant conversation. This was different. This was watching someone be completely themselves, competent and focused and unadorned, and finding that raw authenticity more compelling than any carefully presented charm. "You are a good teacher," he said as they took a break for breakfast around 7, sitting on the bench under the cottonwood with tin cups of coffee and thick slices of bread with butter. "You are a good student, better than most. You listen instead of assuming you already know everything." She took a sip of coffee, then added, "The other ranch hands think you are crazy, spending your time off doing more work. The other ranch hands spend their time off drinking and gambling and waking up with sore heads and empty pockets. I would rather learn something useful." "Is that the only reason you keep coming back?" The question hung in the air between them, and Eli knew he could deflect, could pretend he did not understand what she was really asking. But he had always been honest, sometimes to his own detriment, and he was not going to start lying now. "No," he said, "it is not." Zara set down her coffee cup carefully, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson, I need to be clear about something. I am not interested in romance. I have my work and my independence, and I do not intend to give those up for anyone." "I am not asking you to give up anything. Men always say that, but they do not mean it. They mean they want you to fit your life around theirs, to be available when they want you and invisible when they do not. I have seen it happen to too many women I know." Eli could not argue with that. He had seen it too, the way marriage so often meant a woman surrendering everything she was to become an extension of her husband. "You are right. A lot of men are like that, but I am not asking you to be my wife or my sweetheart or anything else. I am asking to be your friend, to learn from you, to spend time with you. If that is all it ever is, I will count myself lucky." She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her warring with herself, wanting to believe him but afraid to trust. Finally, she nodded. "Friends, then. But I mean it, Eli. I am not looking for anything more." "Understood." They finished their breakfast in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before, charged with possibilities neither of them was quite ready to name. The days fell into a pattern after that. Eli would arrive at 3 in the morning and work alongside Zara until noon, learning the craft of tanning with an intensity that surprised them both. In the afternoons, he would return to the ranch to handle his duties, then come back in the evenings to sit on the bench under the cottonwood and talk with her about everything and nothing. She told him about her father's trapline routes through the mountains, the way the seasons changed the quality of pelts, the economics of the hide trade. He told her about cattle drives and stampedes, about sleeping under the stars and learning to read weather in the sky, about the peculiar camaraderie that developed among men who worked together in isolation. They did not talk about feelings or futures, but those conversations wound around them anyway, implicit in every shared laugh and comfortable silence. Eli found himself thinking about her at odd moments during his work days, remembering something she had said or the way lamplight caught in her hair. He told himself it was just friendship, but he knew he was lying. 2 weeks into this new routine, Mr. Garrett announced the herd was sold and they would be heading back to his ranch near Denver in 3 days. Eli received the news with a sinking feeling in his stomach that he tried to ignore. He had known this was temporary. He had a job, responsibilities. Zara had made it clear she was not interested in anything beyond friendship. There was no reason to feel like his world was ending. He went to Zara's place that evening and found her cleaning her tools, preparing for the next day's work. She looked up when she heard his footsteps and smiled, that rare, full smile that made his heart do complicated things in his chest. "You are early," she said. "I have news." We are heading out in 3 days, back to Garrett's ranch near Denver. Her hand stilled on the leather she was conditioning, and something passed across her face too quickly for him to read. I see. I wanted to tell you myself, not just disappear. I appreciate that. She set down the leather and wiped her hands, not meeting his eyes. It has been good having your help these past weeks. The work has gone faster. Zara, look at me. She did, reluctantly, and he saw in her eyes what he suspected she saw in his, the truth neither of them had been willing to speak. I do not want to go, he said quietly. But you have to. You have a job. I could find another job. There are ranches around here. Surely someone needs a good hand. Eli, no, I told you, I am not looking for someone to rearrange their life around mine. That is exactly the kind of obligation I do not want. What if I am not doing it for you? What if I am doing it because I like Gunnison, because I have learned a valuable trade here, because I have good reasons of my own to stay? Do not lie to me. We both know why you are thinking about staying. He stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her amber eyes, close enough to catch that lavender scent that haunted his dreams. Fine. Yes, it is because of you, but not in the way you think. I am not trying to trap you or change you or make you into something you are not. I just want to be around you. I want to keep learning from you. I want more of these evenings where we sit and talk and I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in my life. If that is all it ever is, I am still better off here than anywhere else. You say that now, but you will resent me eventually. When I do not want to get married or have children or be a proper lady. When I keep working 18-hour days and smelling like leather and chemicals. When I am too tired to be charming or accommodating. Zara, I have spent the last 2 weeks watching you work yourself to exhaustion doing something you love, and I have never been more impressed by anyone in my life. The things you are warning me about, those are the things I admire most about you. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. I am scared, she whispered. I have not let myself care about anyone in a long time, and I am scared of what happens if I let myself care about you and it goes wrong. I am scared too, he admitted. But I think not taking the chance would scare me more. She reached out and took his hand, her calloused fingers lacing through his. If you stay, we do this on my terms, slow. No promises we cannot keep, no expectations beyond what we can actually give each other. On your terms, he agreed. Whatever you need. She nodded, then surprised him by stepping forward and resting her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, like she was something precious and breakable, even though he knew she was neither. They stood like that for a long time, breathing together in the gathering dusk, while the mountains turned purple against the darkening sky. The next morning, Eli went to Mr. Garrett and told him he would not be returning to Denver. The old rancher was disappointed but not surprised. I saw this coming, Garrett said, shaking his head with a rueful smile. You have that look men get when they have found something worth more than wages. She must be quite a woman. She is, sir. Well, I cannot blame you. If I were your age and had a chance at happiness, I would take it too. You have been a good hand, Thompson, best I ever had. If things do not work out here, you come find me. I will always have a place for you. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Eli found work at a smaller ranch just outside Gunnison, owned by a man named Heinrich Mueller, who ran cattle and horses in the mountain valleys. The pay was slightly less than what Garrett had offered, but the work was steady and Mueller did not mind that Eli kept unusual hours, coming in late after spending his mornings helping Zara with the hides. They settled into a new rhythm, Eli and Zara, one that felt both thrilling and terrifying in its domesticity. He would arrive at 3 in the morning and they would work together until noon, their movements synchronized through practice, their conversation easy in the darkness. Then he would go to Mueller's ranch for the afternoon and evening, returning after sunset to sit with Zara while she finished her day's work. Sometimes they would make dinner together in her small kitchen. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, too tired for words but not wanting to be apart. It took another month before they kissed for the first time. It happened on a cool September evening, the aspens on the mountainsides turning gold, the air carrying the first hint of the winter to come. They were sitting on the bench under the cottonwood, and Zara was telling him about her mother, a story she had never shared with anyone before. "She died when I was 8, Zara said, her voice soft in the darkness. "I do not remember much about her, just fragments. The way she smelled like bread and herbs. The songs she used to sing in Irish even though she was born here and barely spoke the language. The way she would braid my hair every morning and tell me I was going to grow up to be strong. She was right about that." Zara smiled sadly. "My father never really recovered from losing her. He threw himself into his work, into teaching me, but there was always this sadness in him, like part of him had died with her. I used to think he was weak for letting grief consume him like that. But now I understand it better. Now I think maybe loving someone that much, being that vulnerable, takes more courage than I gave him credit for." Eli took her hand, something that had become natural between them over the past weeks. "Is that why you have been so resistant to us? Because you saw what loss did to your father and you do not want to risk that kind of pain?" "Partly. But also because I saw what it did to her, being married to someone who loved their work more than anything else, even her. She was lonely, I think, even though she loved him. She had given up so much to be his wife, and he was never home enough to make it worthwhile. Zara, I am not your father, I know, but patterns repeat themselves, do they not? And I have spent so long building a life where I do not need anyone, where I am safe from that kind of disappointment." He turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. "I cannot promise I will never disappoint you. I cannot promise we will not hurt each other sometimes, because people do that even when they love each other. But I can promise I will never ask you to be less than you are. I will never ask you to give up your work or your independence or anything else that makes you who you are. And I can promise that loving you has become the easiest, most natural thing I have ever done, even though you are prickly and stubborn and work too hard and do not trust easily." "I do trust you," she said, and he could hear the wonder in her voice like she was surprising herself. "That is what terrifies me. I trust you, Eli." He kissed her then, soft and careful, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with an intensity that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably. I am going to fall in love with you and it is going to ruin everything. Or it might make everything better." She laughed, that bright sound he had come to crave. "When did you become an optimist?" "When I met you." They kissed again, longer this time, and when they finally went inside her cabin it was together, hands linked, ready to face whatever came next as long as they faced it together. The relationship changed between them after that night, deepened in ways that both frightened and thrilled them. Eli started staying over at Zara's cabin most nights, and they would wake together in the pre-dawn darkness and work side by side as the world slowly came to light around them. He learned to read her moods, to know when she needed space and when she needed comfort, to understand that her independence was not a rejection of him but simply part of who she was. Zara, for her part, learned to let someone in, to share her space and her thoughts and her fears without feeling like she was surrendering something essential. She learned that Eli meant what he said about not trying to change her, that he genuinely admired her work ethic and her skill, that he did not resent the long hours she kept or the fact that her business would always be a central part of her life. Winter came to the Colorado mountains with a vengeance that year, snow piling up in drifts taller than a man, temperatures dropping so low that water froze solid in minutes. The hide business slowed during those months, as fewer hunters made the trek into the high country, and those who did found the animals holed up and hard to track. Zara used the slower season to catch up on repairs to her equipment, to experiment with new tanning techniques, to rest her body from the punishing pace she had maintained for so long. Eli still worked at Mueller's ranch, though the work changed with the season. Now, it was about keeping animals alive through the brutal cold, about breaking ice on water troughs and hauling hay through snowdrifts, and watching for signs of frostbite and illness. He would come home to Zara's cabin exhausted and half-frozen, and she would have the stove burning hot and food waiting, and they would curl up together under layers of quilts and talk about their days until they fell asleep mid-sentence. It was during one of those long winter nights, with the wind howling outside and the cabin creaking under the weight of snow, that Zara said the words that changed everything between them. "I love you." Eli, who had been half asleep with her head on his chest, came fully awake. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, propping herself up on one elbow to look down at him. "I have been trying not to say it because I thought if I did not say it out loud, I could keep pretending this was just convenient companionship or friendship or anything else safe and manageable. But it is not safe and it is not manageable, and I am tired of pretending. I love you, Eli Thompson. I love your honesty and your patience and the way you make me feel like being exactly who I am is enough. I love that you carry water for me at 3 in the morning, and that you listen when I talk about chemical ratios, and that you look at me like I am the most fascinating person you have ever met. I just love you, and I needed you to know." He pulled her down and kissed her with all the pent-up emotion he had been holding back, all the times he had wanted to say those words but had not wanted to pressure her. When they broke apart, he was grinning so wide his face hurt. "I love you too. I have loved you since that first morning when you agreed to teach me, and then worked me half to death, because you refused to accept anything less than excellence. I have loved you through every dawn we have watched together, and every evening we have spent talking. I love you so much it scares me sometimes, but I would rather be scared and with you than safe and alone." She kissed him again, and the conversation devolved into other, wordless expressions of feeling that left them both breathless and tangled together as the storm raged outside. When spring finally came, melting the snow and turning the mountain valleys green, Zara's business picked up again with renewed vigor. Word had spread during the winter about the quality of her work, and she found herself with more customers than she could handle, hunters and traders coming from as far as Wyoming and New Mexico, to have their hides tanned by the woman who could finish 12 before noon. She hired 2 local boys to help with the heavy lifting and basic preparation work, which freed her up to focus on the skilled parts of the process while still maintaining her extraordinary pace. Eli watched her business grow with pride and a little concern. She was making good money now, more than she had ever made before, but she was also working herself to exhaustion again, falling back into old patterns of pushing herself too hard. He tried to talk to her about it, to suggest she raise her prices and take on fewer jobs so she could maintain a more sustainable pace, but she was resistant. "I have to take the work while it is here," she insisted one evening when he found her still working long after dark, her hands cramping from overuse. "The hide trade is volatile. It could dry up at any time. I need to make as much as I can now so I have a cushion for the lean times. You also need to not work yourself into an early grave, Eli said, taking the scraping tool gently from her hand. Come inside, have dinner, rest. I have 3 more hides to finish. They will still be there tomorrow. Eli, you do not understand. This business is all I have. If I lose it, if I fail, I have nothing. He took her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. That is not true. You have me. You have friends in this town. You have skills that would let you make a living in a dozen different ways. This business is important. I know that. But it is not all you are, and it is not all you have. She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw the fear in her eyes, the deep-rooted terror that if she stopped working, stopped producing, stopped proving her value through sheer productivity, she would somehow cease to matter. He recognized it because he had felt it too, that need to define yourself through what you could do rather than who you were. I am scared, she admitted finally. I am scared that if I slow down, even a little, everything I have built will fall apart. I am scared that I am not actually as good as people think I am, that they will figure out I am just someone who works too hard to compensate for lack of real talent. Zara, that is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. You are brilliant at what you do. Your speed is impressive, but it is your skill and your artistry that keep people coming back. You could work half as fast and you would still be the best tanner in Colorado. You are biased. I am honest. And I am telling you that you need to take better care of yourself, because I love you and I want you to be around for a long time, and you will not be if you keep pushing yourself like this. She leaned her head against his chest, suddenly exhausted. Will you help me? Will you tell me when I am overdoing it, even when I do not want to hear it, always? They went inside together, and Eli made her eat and rest while he finished cleaning up her work area. It was not a permanent solution to the deeper issues, he knew, but it was a start. That summer brought other changes. Mueller's ranch was sold to a consortium of businessmen from Denver who wanted to modernize the operation, bringing in new equipment and new management that had no time for what they called outdated methods. Eli found himself increasingly at odds with the new owners, who valued efficiency over animal welfare and profit over the kind of careful stewardship he had learned from men like Garrett and Mueller. By August, he had had enough. He quit and found himself unemployed for the first time since he was 16. Zara's reaction to the news surprised him. Instead of being worried or upset, she looked thoughtful. "What if you worked with me full-time?" she said. "Not just helping in the mornings, but as a real partner in the business. You know the trade as well as anyone now, and we work well together. We could take on more jobs, higher-end work that takes longer but pays better. We could build something together." Eli felt his heart constrict with emotion. "Are you serious?" "I am always serious when it comes to business. You are skilled, reliable, and I trust you. Also, I love you and I like having you around. It seems like a logical arrangement." He laughed and picked her up, spinning her around until she was laughing too. "Yes. Yes, I will be your business partner." "Good. Because I already told Mrs. Hendricks at the general store that you were going to be working with me, and she has been telling everyone, so it would be awkward if you said no." "You were that confident I would agree. I know you, Eli Thompson. You are as committed to this work as I am, and you are as committed to us." She was right. Over the next year, they built the business into something neither of them could have managed alone. Eli handled the customer relations and bookkeeping, tasks that Zara had always struggled with, while Zara focused on the actual tanning and on training Eli to her exacting standards. They took on specialty work, custom projects that required artistry as well as skill, and their reputation grew beyond Colorado into neighboring territories. They also became a fixture in Gunnison society. The couple who worked together at all hours and clearly adored each other, even when they were bickering about chemical ratios or processing times. People in town took bets on when Eli would finally propose, but those people did not understand the nature of their relationship. Eli and Zara did not need marriage to legitimize what they had. They were already partners in every way that mattered, but that did not mean the question never came up. It was Zara who raised it, actually, on a cool October evening almost 2 years after they had first met. They were sitting on their bench under the cottonwood, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of crimson and gold. "You ever think about getting married?" she asked, her voice casual but her body tense beside him. Eli chose his words carefully. "I think about spending the rest of my life with you. Whether we call that marriage or partnership or something else does not matter much to me." "Why do you ask?" "Because I have been thinking about it. About what it would mean. About whether I want it." And she was quiet for a long moment, watching the light fade from the sky. "I always said I would never get married, that I valued my independence too much, that I had seen too many women lose themselves in marriage. But I think I was afraid of the wrong thing. I was afraid of losing myself, but what I have learned with you is that the right person does not make you lose yourself. The right person helps you become more fully who you are meant to be." Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Zara Gallagher, are you proposing to me?" she laughed, turning to face him. "I suppose I am. Not because I think we need a piece of paper to prove anything, but because I want to stand up in front of everyone we know and say that you are my choice, my partner, my love. Because I want to make that commitment publicly, not just privately. Because after a lifetime of being afraid of dependence, I have learned that choosing to depend on someone who is trustworthy is not weakness, it is courage." He pulled her into his arms, his face buried in her hair, breathing in that familiar scent of lavender and leather. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I will stand up in front of the whole world and say that you are my choice, my partner, my love. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. You already are, you impossible man. You already are." They were married in November of 1884 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Gunnison with half the town in attendance. Zara wore a dress the color of cream, practical enough that she could work in it later but beautiful enough to make Eli's breath catch when he saw her. Eli wore his best suit, borrowed from Mr. Garrett, who had made the trip from Denver specifically for the occasion. The vows they spoke were traditional, but the way they looked at each other as they spoke them was anything but, filled with the depth of understanding that came from truly knowing and accepting another person in all their complexity. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well after midnight. Zara, who had never been comfortable in social situations, found herself surrounded by well-wishers who genuinely cared about her. People who had watched her build her business from nothing and admired her for it. Eli spent the evening watching his wife with undisguised pride, marveling at how far they had both come from those early days when neither of them trusted anyone but themselves. They spent their wedding night in Zara's cabin, the same cabin where they had spent so many nights before, and somehow it felt both familiar and entirely new. They made love with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, and afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking about the future. "I want to expand the business," Zara said, her head on Eli's chest. "I want to take on an apprentice or two, people we can train properly so the craft does not die out. The buffalo are disappearing, but there will always be a need for quality leather work. We could teach people to do it right. I think that is a wonderful idea, and I want children, eventually. Not right away because I am not ready to slow down yet, but someday. I want to teach them what my father taught me, pass on that knowledge." Eli felt his heart expand with a joy so intense it was almost painful. "How many children?" "2 or 3, maybe. Enough to keep us busy but not overwhelmed." "What do you think?" "I think you will be an incredible mother, fierce and demanding and loving. And I think our children will be lucky to have you." "They will be lucky to have you too. You are patient and kind, and you never give up on people." "You never gave up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." "I never wanted to give up on you. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." She kissed him, and they made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and whispered word, cementing the promises they had made earlier in the day. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The hide trade did decline as the buffalo herd shrank, but Eli and Zara adapted, shifting their focus to cattle hides and specialty leatherwork, making saddles and boots and gun belts that were prized throughout the territory. They took on apprentices, as Zara had wanted, young people who showed aptitude and dedication, and taught them not just the technical skills but the work ethic and pride in craftsmanship that defined their approach. In the spring of 1887, Zara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Zara worried about how pregnancy and motherhood would affect her ability to work, whether she would lose the business she had worked so hard to build. Eli worried about all the things that could go wrong, the high rates of maternal and infant mortality that made childbirth a dangerous proposition, even in the best of circumstances. But Zara's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she worked right up until the day her labor started, tanning hides in the cool of the morning while Eli hovered anxiously nearby. Their son was born on a cold December morning, arriving into the world with a lusty cry that announced he was healthy and strong. They named him Daniel, after Zara's father, and when Eli held him for the first time, looking down at that tiny red face, he felt a rush of protectiveness and love so intense it brought him to his knees. Zara recovered quickly from the birth, her strength and determination serving her well. She was back to work within a few weeks, though at a slower pace than before, learning to balance the demands of motherhood with the demands of her business. Eli took on more of the physical work, allowing Zara to focus on the skilled tasks that required her expertise while also giving her time to nurse and care for their son. Daniel was followed by a daughter 2 years later, Anna, who had Zara's amber eyes and fierce spirit. And then, 3 years after that, another son, Michael, who was quiet and thoughtful and fascinated by how things worked. Their cabin became a home filled with laughter and noise, and the particular chaos that came with raising 3 young children while also running a business. It was not the life either Eli or Zara had imagined for themselves in their younger years. It was better. It was messier and harder and more complicated, but it was also richer and fuller and more joyful than anything they could have planned or predicted. They taught their children the tanning trade, but also taught them to read and write and do mathematics, to think critically and work hard and value both independence and interdependence. They taught them that love was not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, about doing the work, about choosing each other again and again, even when it was difficult. On a warm summer evening in 1895, Eli and Zara sat on their bench under the cottonwood tree, watching their children play in the yard. Daniel, now 8, was teaching his younger siblings how to properly scrape a hide, his technique already showing the precision and care he had learned from his parents. Anna, 6, was more interested in the chemistry of the tanning process, asking questions faster than anyone could answer them. Michael, 3, was content to play with scraps of leather, making shapes and patterns that hinted at an artistic sensibility. "We did good," Zara said, leaning against Eli's shoulder. "We did," he agreed, wrapping his arm around her. "Though I still cannot quite believe you agreed to marry me all those years ago. I still cannot quite believe I tanned 12 hides before noon, and you asked me how I did it instead of just assuming I was exaggerating or that it did not matter." Eli laughed. "How could I not ask? It was the most impressive thing I had ever seen. You were the most impressive thing I had ever seen. You still think that, even now. Even after you have seen me exhausted and cranky and covered in chemicals and dealing with 3 children who all seem to need something different at the same time. Especially now. You amaze me more every year, Zara Thompson. The way you balance everything, the way you have built this business and this family and never compromised on who you are. You are extraordinary." She turned to kiss him, soft and sweet and familiar after 13 years of marriage. "We are extraordinary. Together." As they sat there in the gathering dusk, their children playing nearby and the mountains turning purple in the fading light, Eli thought about that morning so long ago when he had crossed the dusty street to ask Zara how she accomplished the impossible. He had been looking for technical knowledge, for a skill he could learn and add to his repertoire. He had found so much more than that. He had found his partner, his love, his home. He had found the courage to build a life based not on fear and self-protection, but on trust and openness, and the willingness to be vulnerable with another person. The years continued to roll past, marked by the changing seasons, and the growth of their children and the steady rhythm of work that defined their lives. Daniel showed such aptitude for the tanning business that by the time he was 15, he was handling complex projects on his own, his skill approaching his mother's legendary level. Anna, true to her early fascination with chemistry, became more interested in experimenting with new tanning methods and dyes, pushing the business in innovative directions. Michael, the artist of the family, specialized in decorative leatherwork, creating pieces that were as beautiful as they were functional. Eli and Zara gradually shifted from being the primary workers to being the teachers and managers, guiding their children and apprentices, while also taking time to simply enjoy each other's company. They traveled occasionally, taking trips to Denver and Santa Fe and even once to San Francisco, but they always came home to Gunnison, to the mountains and the cabin, and the work that had brought them together. In the summer of 1902, they celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together friends and family from across Colorado and beyond. Mr. Garrett, now in his 70s, made the trip from Denver with his wife and grandchildren. Heinrich Mueller came with his large, boisterous family. The apprentices they had trained over the years returned with stories of how their teaching had shaped successful careers. The people of Gunnison turned out in force, honoring the couple who had become such an integral part of their community. Standing in the middle of the celebration, surrounded by people they loved and who loved them, Eli pulled Zara aside for a quiet moment. "You remember what you said on our wedding night?" he asked. "About wanting to expand the business and teach apprentices and have children." "I remember. We did all of it. We built everything we dreamed of and more." Zara smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in the way they did when she was truly happy. "We did. Though if you had told me that first morning that asking you to haul water would lead to all of this, I might have sent you away." "No, you would not have. No, I would not have," she admitted. "I knew even then that you were different. I was just too scared to admit it." "I was scared too, but I am glad we were brave enough to try anyway." They kissed, long and sweet and unhurried, while around them the party continued and their children laughed, and the mountains stood eternal against the darkening sky. As the years passed into the new century, Eli and Zara grew older but not slower, their partnership deepening with age rather than fading. They still rose before dawn most days, though now it was to drink coffee together and watch the sunrise rather than to work. They still sat on the bench under the cottonwood tree most evenings, talking about everything and nothing, their hands linked the way they had been since that first tentative touch so many years ago. Their children grew into adults who made them proud, each finding their own path while staying connected to the family business and to each other. Daniel married a schoolteacher from Denver and brought her back to Gunnison, where they built a house near his parents and started their own family. Anna went to college in the East, studying chemistry formally before returning home to apply her knowledge to the tanning business, revolutionizing their processes. Michael traveled for several years, studying art and design, before settling back in Colorado to open a workshop that combined leatherwork with sculpture and other artistic mediums. Eli and Zara became grandparents, delighting in the arrival of each new baby, passing on their knowledge and their stories to a new generation. They taught their grandchildren the same lessons they had taught their children, about the value of skilled work and the importance of independence and the courage it took to love someone deeply. On a crisp autumn morning in 1910, when they were both in their early 50s, Eli and Zara walked hand in hand through the property that had grown over the decades from a small tanning yard to a thriving compound. There was the original cabin, expanded and modernized but still fundamentally the same. There was the large workshop where Daniel and his team processed hides using the techniques Zara had perfected over decades. There was Anna's laboratory, filled with beakers and chemicals and the smell of experimentation. There was Michael's studio, where leather became art. There were homes for their children and grandchildren, a whole community built on the foundation of two people who had chosen to take a chance on each other all those years ago. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had gone back to Denver with Mr. Garrett that day? Zara asked as they walked. No, Eli said without hesitation, because this is exactly where I was meant to be, with you, building this life. I have never doubted that choice, not for a single moment. Even when I was difficult and stubborn and worked too hard and did not trust easily. Especially then. Those are the things that make you who you are, and who you are is the person I love most in this world. She squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with emotion. I love you, Eli Thompson. I have loved you for almost 30 years, and I expect to love you for at least 30 more. At least, he agreed, pulling her close and kissing her temple. Probably longer. They continued their walk, stopping to check in with Daniel at the workshop, to admire Anna's latest chemical innovation, to see the new piece Michael was working on. They visited with grandchildren, offering advice and encouragement and the particular kind of love that grandparents could give. They shared lunch with their children, the conversation ranging from business matters to family gossip to philosophical debates that left everyone laughing and arguing in equal measure. As the sun began to set, Eli and Zara returned to their bench under the cottonwood tree, the same bench where they had shared so many moments over the years. The tree had grown larger, its branches spreading wide to provide deep shade in summer and bare artistic beauty in winter. The bench itself had been replaced several times, but it was always in the same spot, facing the mountains, a touchstone of continuity in their changing lives. I tanned 12 hides before noon that day because I was trying to prove something, Zara said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I was trying to prove I was valuable, that I mattered, that I deserved to take up space in the world. I thought if I just worked hard enough, fast enough, skillfully enough, I would finally feel secure. And now I know that my value was never in question. I mattered all along, not because of what I could produce, but because of who I am. It took loving you and being loved by you to understand that. Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. You gave me the same gift. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was not my father, that I was reliable and hardworking and worthy. But you showed me that I did not have to earn love or belonging, that I could just be myself, and that would be enough. They sat in silence for a while, watching the mountains turn from gold to purple to deep blue as the sun sank below the horizon. Around them, their family was settling in for the evening, lights coming on in windows, the sounds of dinner preparation and children being put to bed, the particular music of a life well lived and fully shared. "Thank you," Zara said finally, "for seeing me that morning, for being curious instead of dismissive, for asking how I did it instead of just assuming it did not matter. Thank you for answering, for letting me in, for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not know anything about tanning but wanted to learn." "The best hand Mr. Garrett ever had," she said with a smile. "The best partner I ever had," he replied, and kissed her as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their story continued for many more years after that. A story of enduring love and partnership, of building something lasting and meaningful together, of facing the challenges of life with courage and grace, and the certainty that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. They grew old together, their hair turning gray and then white, their movements slowing but their minds staying sharp, their love deepening with each passing season. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1934, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, a vast extended family that traced its roots back to that morning in 1882, when a young cowboy had watched a young woman tan 12 hides before noon and asked her how she did it. The celebration lasted for 3 days, with people coming from across the country to honor the couple who had built not just a successful business, but a legacy of love and partnership that inspired everyone who knew them. Eli passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1937, at the age of 79, with Zara holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but without the kind of consuming grief she had always feared, because their love had been so complete, so fully expressed and lived, that she had no regrets, no words left unsaid, no moments left unlived. She knew he had been happy, that they had been happy together, and that was enough. Zara lived for another 7 years after Eli's death, still working in the business she had built, still teaching and advising and pushing for innovation. She died at 86, in the same cabin where she had lived for more than 60 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and the tools of her trade. Her last words were about Eli, how she had seen him in a dream the night before, how he had been waiting for her under the cottonwood tree, how he had asked her if she was ready to come home. The business they had built together continued long after they were gone, carried on by their children and grandchildren, and the apprentices they had trained over the decades. The Thompson Gallagher Tanning Company became legendary throughout the West, known not just for the quality of its work, but for the values its founders had embodied: hard work and integrity, innovation and tradition, independence and partnership, the courage to be vulnerable and the strength to stay true to yourself while also opening your heart to another. And in Gunnison, Colorado, there was a bench under an old cottonwood tree where young couples came to sit and talk about their dreams, where the story was still told of the woman who tanned 12 hides before noon, and the cowboy who asked her how she did it, and how that simple question had grown into a love story for the ages, a testament to the transformative power of curiosity and courage and the willingness to build something beautiful together, one shared dawn at a time.